Hey, witches. Hi, hello, and welcome back to another episode of History.
Yeah. We are slowly but surely working our way through this history of witchcraft book, and we are starting to get into the more, for lack of a better term, modern witch trials. Um, so chapter 10 of the book, which just a reminder for those who don't know, the book is Witchcraft, a History and 13 Trials by Marian Gibson. Um, and we're on chapter 10, which is the trial of Nellie Duncan, Witchcraft Acts in World War II. So,
Ooh.
yeah, this is an interesting one. And I don't think she deserved all of the prosecution that she got, but I also don't necessarily believe that Nellie Duncan is entirely innocent. Um, so the chapter starts out describing a video or like a news reel of um a warship sinking in World War II. Or wait, yeah. And the people, like the soldiers that are trying to climb onto the hull to like save themselves. Um, and then all of a sudden the ship explodes. Most of the men obviously die. They either are vaporized, thrown into the sky, or fall like they fall into the ocean. This ship was the HMS Barham, which sunk in November of 1941. Relatives of those that were on the ship had heard rumors that their men were dead, and some decided to visit mediums um, to try to like communicate with their loved ones or to find out like did they actually die. One such medium was named Helen Duncan. Helen goes by Nellie, so Helen Duncan is Nellie Duncan. And these people think that they witness a miracle. She says in this seance that she connects with a sailor on that ship and correctly asserts that the ship was lost and sunk. And this was way before the official announcement that the ship sunk. And so the police are like, how did she know about these naval secrets?
She's
More
a
on that later.
spy.
Yeah, more on that later. um, she that seance comes up in her trial later. Um, in this time, they refer to this as the modern times multiple times throughout this book, which really modern times is correct because World War II was not that long ago, relatively. Um, so she was initially not accused under the 1735 Witchcraft Act. She was accused under something else, but then it was what's the word I'm looking for? It was changed into um the 1735 Witchcraft Act that she was being tried under. Um and the meaning of witchcraft in modern times um was about magical fraud. So they were basically calling her fraudulent and saying that she was actually pretending to do witchcraft and stealing people's money. And so that's how this is named as a witch trial. So going back, Nellie was born to Archibald and Isabella McFarlane in 1897 as Victoria Helen, because that's her full name. She goes by Nellie. Um, Her parents were respectable. They ran a building business and had 9 children by the time Nellie was 13. The family was Presbyterian, which is a puritanical Protestant sect enforcing piety, chastity, and abstinence. So they are very religious and conservative people. This really shaped Nellie, and initially it meant repression. Most entertainment was banned. There was no music. There was no fun. But Nellie was like a lively tomboyish girl, and she was really struggling with all of the restrictions on basically anything fun in her life. At 16, she was either seduced or assaulted. Not really sure which. She says she was seduced. She does not claim that she was assaulted, but she was 16. So, um, by a person that she never identified, like she never said who this person was, but she gets pregnant. And in 1914, she is an unmarried um, mother. So this is when the First World War is breaking out. Because her parents are who they are and of the religion they are of, they banish her. And so to support herself, she goes to work in a jute mill and makes like sacks and things like that out of the jute plant fibers. She worked 10-hour shifts 6 days a week um, in this place. And, like OSHA was not really a thing in 1914. So there was like dust. They didn't have any kind of PPE. So she was like, her lungs were struggling and with this and everything. So instead, in 1915, the war has now fully started. She applies to work in a munitions factory instead. But because of her work at the jute factory, and other extenuating factors, she is very overweight. She's 210 pounds, which at that time was like extreme. Um, she was only 5.5 feet tall, and she has tuberculosis. So the munitions factory is like, no. And not only did they reject her, but they hospitalized her for compulsory care, for a compulsory cure. So she is forcibly hospitalized and healed. So that's good. But like, um, it's an unfortunate part of her story. After that, she starts working at a bakery, which is a much more healthy place for her to work, and probably helped her with getting food and things like that, because I feel like there's usually perks to working at places like that. And she married a cabinet maker, Henry Duncan, in 1916. So this was not a love match necessarily. It was to salvage her child's prospects, because right now she's an unwed mother. Her daughter is considered a bastard. Like, she wants to um, improve their station in life, basically. And it does help quite a bit. Henry adopts Isabella, which is Nellie's daughter, and they go on to have 7 more children. But he is a cabinet maker, and those rely on thriving economies. So they do best when people are buying furniture and redoing things to their homes. The 1920s and 1930s during the war did not provide that thriving economy. And Nellie and Henry were also constantly ill. Um, Nellie had a lot of persisting lung issues and kidney infections, and Henry had a mental breakdown and a heart attack. Um, this family is haunted by tragedy. Like, there are constantly horrible things happening to them. Isabella gets attacked by an animal and loses an eye. Another daughter, Henrietta, passes as a toddler. Um, Nellie suffers from repeated pregnancy complication, but she didn't have access to um, information about reproductive health. And at the time, contraception was still seen as sinful. So they kept she kept getting pregnant. Um, Henry goes to the war or was in the war, was wounded in the war, and has a pension of 8 shillings a week and a small family allowance, but there was no other income for the family because the business fails. So they move to a smaller house. Nellie starts doing washing and like sewing for people. And she works at a bleaching plant, which is probably not great for her bad lungs, right? Um, so her shift at the bleaching plant starts at 5 o'clock in the morning. At 8 o'clock, she goes home to get the kids ready for school, sends them off, and then goes back to work. At 2 o'clock, she comes home and starts doing other people's laundry and sewing and things like that. Um, so her life is not easy at this point. Um, but Nellie is like, God has got my back. He sees me. He's gonna save everything. Because Nellie is a spiritualist, not a witch. She's not. She is a Christian. So all of her life, she is like, God speaks to me. I see ghosts. I have prophecies. And a lot of people didn't believe her. Um, but that didn't stop her. In 1920s, she starts to experiment with seances. Um, so then she starts becoming known as a medium. Um, and she would have these seances where people bring, or where she would like have things that belonged to the dead materialize in her hands. She would have people bring her things that were owned by dead, like the dead, and um, see the past and future through these objects. And she also claimed, and this is not as prominent in her story, but she also claimed that she could draw other people's sicknesses into herself to cure them. Weird stuff. That's not what she's known for, though. Um, so through all of this, the Duncans began attending a spiritualist church instead of a Presbyterian one. Spiritualists are Christians, but they hold different beliefs. And they do believe in like seances and mediums and things like that. So, um, this is also around the time that like ectoplasm starts becoming a thing. Um, some spiritualist mediums claim they can materialize the entire bodies of spirits, and this is where they like regurgitate or create ectoplasm to build the form of the person, um, which is just wild, and has since been like proven to not be legitimate. Um, but Nellie has joined this church where she sees how other church mediums work, and she's like, "Yes, I'm going to start doing that too." Um, and so she starts making money from doing private seances. She starts having spirit guides um, that contact her to help her. One of these is called Dr. Williams. And he speaks through Nellie with a accent, bringing it. The reason that this is important is because it brings a masculine authority to her home seances. So it makes some people have more
Believe it.
respect for what she's saying. Um, so this Dr. Williams spirit guide tells Henry, her husband, to curtain off a part of their living room and set up a dim red lamp and make a metal cone as a speaking trumpet. Um, so now Nellie is performing these seances in her home behind this curtain, and her seances are complete with ectoplasm. Ectoplasm, to skeptics, looks like muslin cloth that is just wet. And in fact, that is how a lot of the fraudulent mediums of the time created their ectoplasm. But the clients that come to her are like, no, like she is saying things that she has no way of knowing. Um, and she is legit and her business starts booming. Um, so while her business is strengthening and getting huge, her body is weakening. By her early 30s, she had 8 children
Jesus.
and many miscarriages. Right. That's what I'm saying. Like, whoa. Her last baby, Alexander, had died. Um, and then, like I said earlier, Henrietta died as a toddler. So like not having a whole lot of luck there. Um, but because of all of this, Nellie starts chain smoking, um, taking opiates, and drinking a lot of alcohol. Then she gets pregnant again. The hospital staff are like, bro, like you're not gonna live through this. So she does have an abortion and sterilization to save her life. Um, at the time, I don't think abortion was illegal necessarily, but it was like considered super sinful. But obviously, this is not like a super well known thing at this time. She's still got a successful business happening. Later, she has to have a hysterectomy. But through all of this, she turns this into an opportunity. And she says during her like seances and her advertisements that the surgeons during her hysterectomy found evidence of ectoplasmic movements inside her body.
Yeah,
Um,
okay.
right. So, like, for most of these, I've been very much on the witches side. This one, I'm like, girl, I mean, get your money, do what you got to do, but like, I don't feel
Yeah, this
like,
feels very opportunistic.
yeah, it does feel very opportunistic. And like, do I think that she deserved jail time for it? No. People knew what they were getting into. Like,
Yeah.
she provided the service that she was asked to provide, but this is a little sketchy. But now she's a little healthier because she's not dealing with all of the like complications of constantly being pregnant and just having a uterus in general. Um, so she starts to grow her career even more as a medium. Um, and some observers of this situation that were close to them were like feeling like Henry was really pushing her. Her husband Henry was really pushing her to go bigger and go brighter and all of these things. Um, but
Which very well could have been. Yeah.
right, totally could have been, but she does it. She's like, okay. Um, and she goes to like Edinburgh and London and all these places to be tested by psychic investigators to basically prove that she's a medium and grant her access to other churches. These tests consisted of being strip searched, probed, x-rayed, tied up in
Oh,
a
so
sack until
so she
she
so she what is it? Got abducted by aliens.
basically she gets tied up in a sack until she produces ectoplasm. Um,
It's called
most of
urine
these
and
investigators confirmed that she is in fact legit. Um, but there was one named Harry Price who was apparently a very famous psychic investigator at the time. He did accuse her of faking ectoplasm by swallowing muslin and then vomiting it to look like the ectoplasm, which again is something that the people did in those times to make this look like that. But even though that um, like critic, for lack of a better term, said she was fake, her efforts paid off. She got accepted by the London Spiritualist Alliance in 1933 and started to like get some fame and started to really make quite a bit of money. So much so that they moved to a um, 4-bedroom bungalow in Edinburgh. So,
Nice.
yeah, things are looking up for the Duncans. In late 1943, we are now in the Second World War, about 5 years into the Second World War, and she is booked by Ernest and Elizabeth Homer to give materialization seances at their spiritualist church in the naval city of Portsmouth on England's south coast. This is the beginning of the end for Nellie. Well, kind of. It's the beginning of the end for her booming career. Um, they she goes to their church in December 1943. She goes upstairs to see their seance room because apparently that's a thing. Um, and she's like, this church is also called the Master Temple, by the way. Um, and this is She's like, "Yes, we're gonna do this." So, mind you, the city at this time, really the whole world at this time was very, like, grim. There was a lot of terrible things happening. There was bombings happening constantly in Europe. Um, People are frightened. They're terrified of dying, of losing their homes, of invasion to their city because this is right across the channel from France, and they can hear like the gunfire and stuff from France right across the um channel. um so this is called a spy scare, and because of Nellie's knowledge of the HSM Barham sinking, um sometimes in some spots Nellie starts to be targeted for being a spy, but that'll come up more later as well. In 1940, the Master Temple gets um oh, the point of talking about the grim mood and everything was that now is the prime time to take advantage of people with these seances. Like people are wanting answers, they're wanting to know what's happening to their loved ones. And so people are flocking to mediums and all of that for like a sense of hope. Um so in 1940, the Master Temple is registered as a church business, so they're allowed now to charge for healing and seances. um, Bessie Homer, which is the person who invited her to. It's Elizabeth Homer, Ernest and Elizabeth. Elizabeth goes by Bessie. Um, she um, is also a medium and a psychic healer, and the president of this church. So she starts having these circles where they do like Christian sermons, they do prayers and hymns. But then they have like a seance and they do talking to spirits and prophecy and all of that. So she is also a part of this trial. There are 4 people that get tried at this witch trial, Nellie being the main one, but then Homer and Bessie both also are tried, and there's one more. I don't remember if it's Henry or not, but we'll get there. It's been a minute since I finished reading this. Um, so this is a really unusual approach to Christianity, even for this time. And some people are like, this is blasphemy. And the police come to one of her seances at one point, and during the like raid, Bessie says, "Never mind, friends. Jesus suffered like this." So she's like comparing their prosecution to Jesus's prosecution, which is making more conservative Christians even more like, what the fuck? Um, which is valid a little bit, but whatever. Um, and why are police raiding spiritualist meetings and seances, you ask? Because these materialization seances have been classified as fraudulent money making enterprises. So they've started like cracking down on this because that's what's important during World War II. Um, so just going to this church costs money. Like, just going to a regular service costs money. This is again why I'm like, this sounds sketchy. So just going to a temple service costs 1 shilling and a sixpence. If you want to go to a materialization seance, that's going to cost 12 shillings and sixpence, which is around $32 in today's money. Um, the Homers did do some healing work for free and donated some of their profits to fundraisers like Aid to China, the Wireless Fund for the Blind, Wings for Victory, and the National Savings Fund. Um, and later, those charitable donations will be cited in court as evidence of good character of these people. Um, but basically, things are going well for them. They're making a lot of money. Nellie's making a lot of money. She does not donate her earnings to charity because she is supporting a family of what, two of their children died, but they had 8 total, so 6 kids and a husband. Like, she's supporting a lot of people with her earnings. But she earns at least £8 per seance. So she does about 13 seances a week. Um, so basically the equivalent of what she was making is about 35,000 or 3,500 to $4,500 a week in
Damn.
today's money. Right. So she was making good money. She even at this point has gotten an agent because she's got so many requests and so many things happening. So in January 1944, this is the other person that's tried, by the way, is her agent. In January 1944, her and Frances Brown, her agent, travel to Portsmouth, and because they have been in London and Edinburgh for a while. Um, And Frances is a 48-year-old medium and wife of a engineer. They go to Portsmouth for these seances, and they have each one has about 20 to 30 attendees. Mind you, she's charging $8 per person. So for 20 to 30 people, she's making like I'm not good at math, but there you go. She's making a lot of money per seance. She materializes their mothers, fathers, sons, all family members, anybody that they were close to, and her spirit guides perform. So Albert is her Dr. Williams spirit guide. He MCs while Peggy sings and dance. Peggy is one of her spirit guides. She's a young Scottish girl like Nellie had been. And police suspected that Peggy was actually Nellie kneeling under a sheet, basically. So a lot of this, they're accusing her of being like a ventriloquist, basically. Um, One of these instances and of people like claiming she was fraudulent, the police are investigating. The mother of missing RAF navigator Freddie Nuttall visits Nellie's seance and was told that Freddie had been shot. Um, this Freddie's mother's friend is inquiring and to the like people who actually know what happened to him. And they learned that his aircraft's pilot, Pinky, had died, but Freddie was still living in France and someone was caring from him. Now we have more records and we have more accurate records. So we know that actually Freddie died when his plane exploded on June 23rd, 1943. Both the news that the friend had received and Nellie were wrong. None of that happened. So there's a few times that she's been like what she's saying has been disproven. But she's got, an agent now and she's got people managing. She's basically got PR. And they are working to deflect suspicion. They have the attendees come into the seance before Nellie comes out, and she has like this cabinet that her spirit guides, she goes into and her spirit guides come out. They get to inspect her cabinet. They have women strip her and basically examine her body like they did in the witch trials, and they searched for muslin in her like clothing and in her upper body cavities. And then it specifically quotes, though few looked lower. So it's like they check her mouth and her, her nose and stuff for muslin, but they don't look in her lower body cavities. So I'm just imagining that this woman has like shoved some muslin up her vajay and is like gonna pull it out and then produce it out of her mouth. And I'm just really grossed out by this. But it is what it is. In January 1944, however, her luck runs out. Portsmouth police receive a complaint from Stanley Worth, who is a 29-year-old lieutenant of the Royal Navy Volunteer Reserve at HMS Excellent. Um, he That's a lot is known about him. A lot of his wartime roles are classified. It's possible that he was like a spy somehow. Some people did claim that he was a government spy looking into Nellie's knowledge of HMS Barham, which she correctly said sank earlier in her life. He started attending the Master Temple in 1943, so he's been going to this place for almost a year. But on January 14th, 1944, he decides that Nellie is a fake medium because one of her spirit guides says, I have here a lady who passed over with some trouble to the lower part of her body. Stanley says, is it for me? And she's like, yes. And he says, are you my aunt? Well, he's basically trying to catch her here. So all of his aunts are living. But the spirit says, yes, I am your aunt, and accuses him of behaving strangely. She later says, I have here for the same gentleman his sister. So meaning it's Stanley's sister. Stanley's like, I only have one sister and she's alive. And she's like, no, 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 no. This sister was premature. Um, and Stanley's like, nope, you're wrong. There were no premature children in our family. And he's basically now like, this is fraud. She's lying. I've been taken in. So he brings in a police constable, Thomas Cross, and they do a raid on her. She's arrested on suspicion of fraud and taken to King Cross Police Station. And then she's detained there overnight and then remanded to Holloway Prison, where she's verbally abused and physically abused, honestly. So, like, the warders are calling her all kinds of names. They're telling her that her husband should divorce her and her son should disown her. She's accused of having lice, and to, I guess, get rid of the lice, like, throw boiling hot water on her. And initially, she is charged under the Vagrancy Act, which is used to prosecute fraudulent traveling fortune tellers. But about 10 to 15 days later, they changed the charges to under the Witchcraft Act of 1735, which enables them to charge her with more serious offenses. Nellie is relabeled as a witch because her agency is now presented this as the supposed act of raising and communicating with spirits as witches were thought to do, as well as fraud and causing public mischief. So there are 4 co-defendants. It's Nellie, her agent Francis, and then the founders of the temple, Bessie and Ernest. They are all facing accusations of conspiracy to pretend to exercise or use a kind of conjuration. The Portsmouth magistrates are like, this is not for us. So they send the trial to the Old Bailey Court in London. John Maud is prosecuting, assisted by Henry Ellum. Nellie's defense is led by Charles Loseby, who is a passionate spiritualist and a stubborn fighter, and he had served in the British colonial military regiments. He, while serving in the army, was both gassed and wounded, and by the World War One's end, he was so ill with pain and this is in quotations, neurosis, that he was prescribed electric shock therapy. This is her defense. Okay. Not looking good for Nellie here. Charles Losby decides to argue that Nellie's abilities are not supernatural. They're natural, and everything that spiritualists say is true. Mind you, he is also a spiritualist. So he's trying to like prove his own beliefs in court, basically. He's like, there is no death. Spirits live on in another world. Nellie's materializations are real. There's no ventriloquism, no muslin. And he produced over 40 witnesses who were like, her work is authentic. She was correct with my stuff. Um, and unfortunately, among the congregation of the Master Temple, there were other mediums who were witnesses for the prosecution, saying that she was a fraud. Um, this defense team is a piece of work. They treat her terribly. Charles says that all of his clients are unimportant people and he is just using them to prove his spiritualist theories true. Um, he calls her a kind of conduit pipe for spirits, a big fat woman, uninspired, a
Damn.
nobody. Yeah. um, unable to speak in cultured English. And the jury should reject evidence of fraud because it involves deep thinking on the part of Mrs. Duncan, which you may think is totally and absolutely ridiculous. So he's basically like, she's too fucking dumb to come up with this plan. What the fuck, bro?
Sir.
Yeah, he's a
Sir.
big dickhead. And it's crazy because he actually is at the time considered a feminist man. So he supports feminist man or feminist reforms like equal rights in industry and equal pay and all of that. But he opposes extending voting rights to women because there's an educational value attached to the vote, and many women were too ignorant to make political decisions. He does not allow Nellie, Bessie, or Frances to speak in their own defense. The only defendant he allows to speak is Ernest Homer. And he said that he would call Nellie if she went into a trance and allowed her spirit guide, Albert, to speak for her.
Okay.
Yeah. So he is hoping here that he can use this. He's making this into a mockery. He's hoping he can use this trial to prove that Nellie really is a medium and that spiritualism is true and real. Um, and he's hoping that he can get the judge to allow this. Both the judge and jury are like, no.
Good.
So instead, Charles speaks for Nellie. Um, and it's not good. Um, later, a friend of Charles will say that, like, he fucked up by not allowing Nellie to speak for herself because she really could have used her own words to her defense and it would have been better than what Charles did. Um, Also, during this trial, it is accidentally revealed that both Nellie and Frances have been convicted in the past of other crimes. Nellie of one related to fraudulent mediumship, Frances for shoplifting. Um, it's just insane. Like, so on March 31st, 1944, the prosecution and defense rest, and the jury takes 25 minutes to deliberate and find all four defendants guilty. Nellie goes to prison for 9 months, of which she serves 6. Frances serves 4, which is her full term. The Homers were both convicted, but because of their good reputations, they were allowed to remain free. And Bessie even continues to work as a faith healer and a demonstrator of mediumship during this time. Wild. Um, Nellie has fans, right? She's gained some fame doing this. So her backers have labeled her the Britain's last witch, and they've labeled this a witch trial. Um, and they're like campaigning for her freedom and for her like justice for Nellie kind of vibe. Um, but because of the changes in legal definitions and religious beliefs from, the 1700s to the 1940s, the term witch trial doesn't really mean witches anymore. It's more so um, a miscarriage of justice and conspiracy, typically focused on women. Um, although some more modern political people will use it to describe persecution of men, but we're not even going to get into that. Um, so yeah, they um basically her followers are like, listen, this police constable and army guy framed her. They thought she was a security risk because of her revealing that ship sinking before the announcement. And so they come back and frame her for fraud because of that. And her followers are like die hard. They're like, nope, she knows what she's doing. She is legit. Um, but there's really no evidence that that is the case. That they came back and like framed her and all of that. Um, in fact, Winston Churchill described the choice to hold a witchcraft trial as obsolete tomfoolery. So Winston Churchill, who like the leader at the time, was like, "This is fucking dumb." It, during World War II, right now we've got Nazis fucking gassing people, and this is what we want to fight about. Really? Okay. But Nellie's reputation actually survives her trial and her conviction and her like sentence in jail. She comes out of prison and there are people like weeping disciples in quotes, and they have like bouquets of flowers for her. She comes out and she says she recovered from that awful place, and she resumes seances and starts right back up with what she was doing. Later, however, there is less support for her because she has an increased reliance on morphine and alcohol, which makes her seances less impressive. And allegations of fraud continued. In fact, when she died in 1956, she had done a Nottingham seance and it was under police investigation. And Charles Losby, her fucking shit ass defense attorney, claims that she was murdered and that the police executed their witch. Um, there's not really any evidence that she was murdered, but she was under police investigation when she died. So that is the insane um life trial and conclusion of Nellie Duncan's story. A lot.
What?
The next one, I don't know how to pronounce these names, but next time we'll be doing chapter 11. It's the trial of, and I'm going to pronounce these wrong because I did not look them up beforehand. I will look them up before the next episode. The trial of Barang Leroltholi and Gabashane Bashupa, magical murder at the end of the European Empire. So that's the next one. And these are going to continue to get more modern as time goes on.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm excited.
Hmm. Cool. Well, until next time.
Bye.